Let me just introduce Lance Uggla to those that may not be familiar with him. So Lance is Canadian. He's the CEO and chairman of IHS Markit. And in 2003, Lance founded Markit Limited, which has grown into IHS Markit as an independent source of credit derivative pricing. So I've had the pleasure, Lance, of knowing IHS Markit for 15 of those 18 years. But for those not familiar with IHS Markit, I wonder if you'd give us a quick overview of the firm's key businesses.
Okay, no, thanks, Daniel, and it's lovely to see you again. It's been a while, and it's good to connect virtually. And thank you for having me here today. First off, I really think of IHS Markit as an information company, and I know information in the information age. It's now a big business and one that permeates many industries, but we're very much focused in three verticals: energy, financial markets, and transportation. There's many intersections in those info services provisions to our customers, where we help them make decisions, meet regulatory requirements, provide transparency to marketplaces and to their customers. And these are big verticals that have substantive information sets and demands for information for decision making.
Okay, and you founded the company in 2003, and yet the company that you're heading is being sold for 37 billion euros, 44 billion US dollars in less than 20 years. What first inspired you to get into data in 2003? Because it's kind of, everybody knows how important it is now, but at 2003, it wasn't that case.
Yeah, well, if you think of over time in the financial markets, I guess even if you go back to the stock exchanges, they were set up really to help create liquidity and facilitate trade, and the information and data sets around it were kind of secondary to the decision. Roll forward 10 or 15 or 20 years, whether it's equities or government bonds or foreign exchange or the market that I attempted to or went out to monetize, the credit markets, it was just that point in time where more transparency was needed to allow markets to develop and grow. And if you remember 2003, post Enron, there was new regulations coming into play called EITF, 02, 03, 03, 04. I think they shifted the years once. And so many times demands for information are driven by wanting to build a bigger or more sizable marketplace, or two, responding to a regulatory change or a large market event. And it so happened that I was in that right place at the right time. I understood as a global markets head those data needs and information needs, but we didn't call it big data then. We didn't call it data science. It was called math, and the compute power was nowhere near what we have today. But it was a decision-making input, and it could start to be used in a much more advanced way. And that was the timing that allowed me to, set up the company around the credit markets and the derivative markets in general.
And is there any advice then you'd give? You can imagine with the FinTech conference, we have a number of people who are setting out on that journey. Is there any advice you would give would-be entrepreneurs in the data and tech space? Are there any lessons from your own experience?
I guess some of the, you definitely have to bet on yourself as an entrepreneur and actually believe in what you're doing. One of the things that I found that really made the success of my company, I think, extraordinary, was to share that success, not just with the people that help you build it broadly. And even today, prior to the strategic merger, every single employee in the company received shares every single year at IHS Markit. So it really had a feeling of pride and ownership, which I think is important. The second thing is bringing in some of your strategic customers who really are helping you develop your products. A lot of people, the FinTech has a great idea. they're leveraging technology, but in the end, they need input from market participants to really be great. And my view is I always qualified that input, whether it came from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Toronto Dominion Bank, Svenska Handelsbank. It wouldn't matter where it came from. They were sharing their knowledge, and their knowledge to me is IP. And therefore, a model where you're sharing the development of the company with market participants, as long as you're not creating any conflicts, I think was very, very helpful. And it meant that I was diluted earlier than maybe some entrepreneurs like, but I found the partnership fueled the success of the company and made it a really vibrant, exciting place to work.
And a related question to that: where did you waste the largest amount of time? Because I guess being an entrepreneur, there's a bit of a trial and an error.
Yeah, there's always that, and whether you're doing it in an entrepreneurial company or whether you just are an innovator in general, you can waste a lot of time thinking about things and attempting to build new products or services. So for me, it was probably I think the real need in today's entrepreneurial build, you have to be towards the front end of the tech curve. And technology is changing so rapidly that it's easy to develop a product leveraging technology that you think is right-sized or the right fit for today, but because of its rapid development curve, you actually end up, by the time the product's launched, you're already behind the curve. And so, another piece of advice is really spend a lot of time to understand technology. Don't be one of those people that sit in a room and say, that's for the people in the future. So right now people talk a lot about crypto and distributed ledger technologies. They're starting to talk a lot about quantum computing. If you shift into energy, they're talking about hydrogen and storage, and hydrogen fuel cells are popular again. And I think a lot of people like to think that that's for the next generation. But this stuff moves so rapidly, Daniel, that the next thing you know, you're behind the 8 ball. So I would say to all the entrepreneurs, the mistakes maybe I made is trying to second guess technology, and things that took hours just 15, 20 years ago are taking nanoseconds now. And that means that your decision-making frameworks and the products that you can create from new technologies that have rapid compute power, it gives you a competitive edge potentially. So stay at the right place on the tech curve.
You may well have answered this, but let me see if you've got anything else to add. What do you see happening in the future then with fintech and data? Where is the company focused at the moment, and what are the opportunities that you're focusing on?
Right. Well, again, the data science as a word and language and kind of an important topic for today's information-based companies, and that's leveraging your content with technology and making sure that you can create great new decision points that might help a customer, whether it's a policymaker, a corporate developing strategy, or somebody in the financial markets making a decision to buy or sell something or to lend to somebody. It's really important that we're leveraging both quantitative and qualitative data together in new ways. And of course, you only have to go back to the late 80s when we got our first Excel spreadsheet into the early 90s. We started to be able to, make quantitative decisions a bit faster. Then we had object-oriented programming, and that we kind of thought was like a whole new wave of speed and analytics, but it still was all quantitative. Today, you have the ability to scour press articles, media, data. You're able to combine them together, create decision-making factors that can drive so many new decisions. And so it really is that blend of technology and leveraging artificial intelligence, mass data, quantitative and qualitative, and bring that together in some fashion that gives you a competitive edge or helps your customer gain a competitive edge, and the service that you provide them is cheaper to be provided many times by a vendor, and therefore the competitive edge for the customer is how they use that tool to make their decisions uniquely. And finding that right balance is important. You don't want to be your customer, and you want to give your customer something that is less expensive to acquire than to build themselves.
Although Markit's a European company, IHS Markit listed on NASDAQ and then NYSE. Why did you do this? What does that say about the ability of the EU sort of capital markets at the moment? And then this is a big policy debate, but it just stands out.
Yeah, no, at the time, I remember talking to some of the, my network in the UK about the decision to use the US capital markets for the IPO. And it really, the structure that I used, well, number one, UK citizen, I'm living in the UK. I set up the company as a UK tax headquartered company. But there wasn't a lot of comparables. And when you list a security in a stock market, you want to have the liquid comparables, people that you can compare to. So for me, it was MSCI, it was Verisk, it was FactSet, it was Moody's, S&P, NASDAQ, ICE. There was a whole bunch, CME. So you have a whole plethora of comparables. And they were all trading at reasonable multiples and levels that you could be compared to and benchmarked against. So, a group of innovative banks said to me, well, the best way to stay UK tax headquartered and list in the US is to use a shelf company in between. Very common, many companies use it, and it'll give you the best of both worlds. And that was the decision that I made at the time. In hindsight, I guess I'll never know whether we would have traded more, at a better multiple or a worse multiple on the LSE. You look at the London Stock Exchange and David Schwimmer and what he's been doing with Refinitiv, et cetera. What a great benchmark. So I guess if we were both there, we'd be attracting others. So, maybe it was a mistake, Daniel, but it was a decision at the time I thought was right, and I made it. But I didn't want to move the company to the US. I wanted to stay in the UK. And my view is the UK, regardless of Brexit, it's a great place to hire people. It's more connected to the EU than not connected. And therefore, looking forward, I think, S&P will, post-merger, will have different, plans. But for me, I think you make business decisions along the way, and then you have to maximize, those outcomes. But that's why I did it. Whether it was right or wrong, that's I don't have really an opinion on that. It was just the decision I made at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The EU at the moment is at a position where I think they feel a little bit vulnerable through the lack of successful, very large tech firms compared to particularly the US. And the skill sets that I think two things. It's when I've listened to people around this, it's not that there are ideas in Europe that are lacking. It's not because there's innovation. There is, but the problem is how you go from a small company to a very large company, and that's where Europe is kind of falling down. And I think two things related to this. The first is, and it comes back to why you listed in the US compared to Europe. But number one, your view on anything policymakers can do to help.
Right.
Yes, maybe about listing, but it's slightly more broadly. And then the skills dimension. You as you build a company from to 300 people when I first knew the company to 4,000, 5,000 people. The skill set of the people around you to run that company changes. And you mentioned the skills in London there, but how did you cope with this as a firm?
Right. No, those are all good points. Well, just the first thing I'd say is the listing was access to capital. So, I think every company should want to access capital to the best of their ability. And at the time, the comparables were not as obvious for me on the LSE versus NASDAQ. But I think the listing, is that's a separate piece. That's, stock exchanges, they need to market, they need to attract, they need to make it attractive, and dual listings are never that attractive. So, that to me is one point. Being headquartered and, developing economies around you in the countries that you operate in is a separate decision. And I never struggled hiring talent in any of our office locations around the world because we're an innovative company. We were growing. We shared our upside with our employees. We care about diversity and inclusion. We were working with exciting marketplaces and innovative customers in the financial markets, energy markets, and transportation. We're working in data and technology, so that attracts a lot of people that are studying data science, whether they're studying it at Imperial College or LSE, or they're studying it at Harvard or Stanford or INSEAD or in Amsterdam. The fact is it's if you're a global company, I think you can be an entrepreneur and build a company anywhere in Europe equal to the US or Asia. Once the company gets going, though, regulators do have a role to play, and I think that regulators, to me, over my period of time, a lot of times I feared that regulatory change was going to shut us down, and then other times it gave us so much work that we didn't know what to do with. And I actually think that regulatory change creates opportunities. But I think all I would say, my only word of advice to a regulator would be, is that services that are utilities will operate as utilities, and they generally won't be able to afford to be as creative and innovative as they need to be to compete. So if you want your European companies to compete, don't be too restrictive on their commercial models. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be regulated, inspected, looked at, managed. And I love this concept of what I always tell customers: let's build a commercial utility. And they go, what's a commercial utility? And I said, a commercial utility is one where we choose a margin, 30%, 35%, 40%, and cap it. That means if you're wildly successful, prices have to come down. And that to me is a commercial utility. But it gives me a margin and a horsepower to compete, attract talent, develop products, invest. And I love that model. And I encourage people to build commercial utilities because they cap greed, they cap excess profits, they allow to pass on benefits back to consumers, but they also let you innovate and hire great people. And I think that's where I found a natural place to be able to convince market participants to allow me to develop products. And over that time, we probably, I know they didn't call them unicorns in 2003, there was no unicorns running around, but I guess over the years, we created 10 or 12 of them internally that all were, and in many of them, driven by regulatory change. And therefore, that model is live and vibrant and working in Europe. And I don't see any difference in talent in any parts of the world. I could have built this company in the UK, in Stockholm, in Hong Kong, in New York, in Toronto. It's attract great people, motivate, inspire, be fair, and work hard. So I don't have any negatives to say about places in the world. They all offer opportunity.
Great. What are you doing around the ESG and climate change agenda at IHS Markit?
Well, so it's funny, this morning I was talking to somebody, they said, we're ESG investing. And this is another new buzzword. I said, what's ESG investing? Is that, not that I didn't know, but I said, is that, is it the E, is it the S, is it the G? Where are you getting the data? Where's the information coming? So of course, as a company with a big energy footprint, big transportation footprint, and a financial market customer base, we have a lot of information to participate in the ESG discussion. And to me, you know, the G, a lot of it is scraping websites and counting and putting, you know, apples and oranges into columns and rating companies based on their governance and their decision making. Great, very simple. S, probably equally less onerous than the E. But the E is actually where all the action is going to be. And that's where IHS Markit was focused on. S&P, however, has got with Robeco Sam and TrueCost, they have a great business around ESG ratings. But to me, as we go forward, we need to be able to get into the detail of E. And the E, it's, if you're interested in climate and impact, it's CO2 emissions. We need to reduce CO2 emissions. How is this company doing it? How is a company that has CO2 emitting assets improving those assets and also investing in the future to create a more sustainable world? And so from my perspective, IHS Markit and then S&P, IHS Markit together has a huge role to play in creating ESG ratings, but also in building the knowledge base around the E. So we as IHS Automotive, we have all the tailpipe emissions data from all the OEMs. That's an important piece of information. We understand where all the assets are in the energy market, and therefore understand climate change impact, geolocation tagging of assets, a whole bunch of things that will be really important. And we have an agricultural business that we had bought from Informa, and that's positioned us in a space to, you know, be more involved around land use. So I think we will play into the information provision for ESG ratings. Will be very strong on the E, and S&P Global, after the strategic merger, will of course have a very serious role along with MSCI, Sustainalytics, and others in providing ESG ratings that's going to help investment decisions, help corporates, you know, position themselves better. There's so much to do, Daniel. It's I think if I think back to, you know, the internet, the information age, I think we're going into the sustainability age, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for companies and providers alike to participate.